three old guys are sitting around like the Union League club. No Jews have ever been admitted. But as the three of them know, their names used to be Goldstein, Goldfarb, and Cohen. They had all three had converted. So and they the subject comes up. Why did you convert? So the first guy says, well, at my firm, you couldn't make partner if you were Jewish. So I converted. And the second guy says, well, my father-in-law wouldn't give me the family business unless I converted, so I converted. And the third guy says, well, I converted because I thought the teachings of Christianity were superior to the teachings of Judaism. And the guy says to him, what do you think we are, a couple of goyim? Please join me in welcoming our panel here, Michael Krasny, the author of Let There Be Laughter, and my fabulous New Yorker colleagues, Adam Gopnik, Patty Marx, and Calvin Trillin. All right. Wait, no, Krasny. I know, it's... All right.
And 5 Jews can't get themselves seated.
I know.
I'm just used to being on the far left.
Nothing but laughs here. Okay. Michael Krasny, why are Jews so funny?
Why are Jews so funny? Well, the standard answer to that is because of all the suffering they went through, and it's like the Czech great story of the golem. They use it for aggression, they use it for defense. But the truth of the matter is I discovered in writing this book that it may be in their epigenetics. No, I'm just kidding about that. There is this theory about DNA with Jews, but mostly it comes out of their experience, mainly the Ashkenazi experience, and the desire really to, in some ways, provide an analgesic to suffering. That is a lot of what it's about.
But I mean, much as we dwell, and appropriately so, and have even holidays about our suffering, I mean, other people suffer too.
They do.
So that can't be the only thing. Come on, Trillin, what do you think? I mean,
I didn't say it was the only thing, Jeffrey.
Okay,
but let's go to Bud.
What?
I'm from Kansas City. We had no suffering at all.
That's right. Just barbecue. Well, all right, Adam.
Well, I come from a split family. I'm Jewish, my wife is not. And we have 2 kids, one of whom is Jewish and one of whom is not. And we knew that instantly because Olivia, my daughter, is because at one point, we were trying in that desperate business of getting kids into wetsuits in the summer. And I was saying to my oldest son, look, if you don't get your wetsuit on now, you're going to be the one who suffers. And Olivia was forced that, and I'll be the one to suffer most. And you knew instantly how the genes had divided in that particular field. Now, here's a good question, though, for you on that, Michael, is Sephardic humor, right? Do you have a lot of Sephardic humor in the book?
Is this a one-liner?
What? No, it's a genuine inquiry.
It's a riddle.
It's a genuine inquiry.
Most of it is not a Sephardic humor. Most of it is Ashkenazi. Like I said, it's Ashkenazi hegemony, or whatever you want to call it, yeah.
Well, there's the other thing of suffering, even though you wouldn't think it's, I think one of the first jokes in Michael's book, the version I heard was the grandmother who dotes on her first grandchild and wants the little boy to be left with her. She lives in North Miami Beach, and finally the daughter leaves the little boy while they go to Nassau, and they're walking along the beach, and he's near the water, and suddenly a huge wave comes and sweeps him out to sea. And she falls on her knees and said, God, this can't happen. This is my whole life. I'll do anything. I'll feed the sick. I'll go to the synagogue 4 times a day. I'll do anything you want. And there's lightning, thunder. Little boy's back on the beach, good as new. And she looks up and she said, he had a hat. Now, I think one of the interesting things about that joke...
There's nothing funnier than explaining why a joke is funny. So please.
No, I'm not going to explain why it's funny. I'm going to explain why it's a Jewish joke. And there are jokes that could be any kind of jokes. They're told as Jewish jokes. Yeah. I thought it was a pretty good joke. I saw, on when they used to have it on the internet, the old Jews telling jokes. And this is about a sperm donation clinic, and Mr. Goldberg walks in and says, I'd like to donate. I said, excuse me, Mr. Goldberg, but may I ask your age? He said, I'm 92 years of age. I said, well, you're a little old. He said, I'd like to donate. So they give him a jar and a Playboy magazine. They put him in a room. And the doctor walks by and he hears, ooh, ooh, ah, ah, ooh, ooh. And he said, Mr. Goldberg, are you all right? And he said, I can't open the jar. Now,
And then you're
we're telling-
accused, that's not really a Jewish joke.
no, that
We're telling jokes now, so
he could be
Patty,
Italian.
Patty, yes.
Well,
Patty.
could be
I've been
Italian,
looking
right?
around the internet. I know some jokes too.
Yeah.
Is this a Jewish joke? I never can tell jokes. Hold on. I gotta see if it's the man or the woman. Yeah, a woman says, "Why don't you come upstairs and we'll have sex?" And the guy says, "I can do one or the other."
Right. I was just thinking of that joke. Yeah, and that joke is in Michael's book.
it is,
And-
along with
but
other
it's a
jokes
Jewish
about
joke.
these,
But-
shall we
but-
say,
but
older
about-
men with younger women.
Older men with your, but is that a Jewish joke?
No, a lot of these jokes translate over. Let me give you an example. Recently,
Well, but I'm not sure I
See,
agree
like
with
the
you.
hat joke.
Pardon?
If you said yarmulke, it wouldn't be funny.
wouldn't be
But it would
funny.
be a Jewish joke.
Yes, but
Yeah, but
no, but if you're going to knight somebody and has a yarmulke on, and you say, "Why is this night different than all other nights?" Which the Queen supposedly said, that becomes a distinctive Jewish joke. Look, a lot of the jokes have to do with separation. They have to do with chosenness. They have to do with distinctness, and they also have to do with loss. And when you trace the trajectory from, let's say, the old world of the shtetl, there were jokes that were terribly, funny and yet not funny, like the two Jews in front of a firing squad, and one says to the other, "Don't we get a last request?" And he says, "What do you want to get us in trouble?" That's a shtetl joke. But then you kind of fast forward to the United States and to all this assimilation and loss, which becomes part of the source of the humor. And I've been always wanting to tell this joke in New York. So here's the joke. There are a band of, actually it begins with a Frenchman, a German, and a tough New York Jew, okay? And they get captured by a band of cannibals. And the cannibals take them into the village, and there's a big cauldron. Some of you know this joke. Oh, I'm going to tell it anyway, my own way. So there's this big cauldron full of vegetables and the like, and a guy steps out with a loincloth, and he says, "Gentlemen, I speak fluent English. We're cannibals, and we're going to kill you, and we're obviously going to eat you. But I want you to let you know that we're going to skin you, and we're going to take your skin and make it into a canoe, and for generations it'll be in our tribe. And we're enlightened enough that we're going to let you choose the way you want to die." He says to the Frenchman, "How do you want to die?" The Frenchman figures they don't have a guillotine. He says, "Guillotine." Guy takes a hatchet out of his loincloth, chops off the Frenchman's head. He says, "You, the German, how do you want to die?" He says, "Luger." Figure they don't have a Luger. Give him a Luger. Takes out a gun, shoots him to death. Tough New York Jew, "How do you want to die?" He says, "You got a fork?" He says, "A fork?" He says, "Yeah, I have a lot of things in my loincloth, as you've seen. Here's a fork." He says, "Here's your fucking canoe."
yeah, but that doesn't.
The thing about you.
That's a complicated joke.
It is a complicated.
That's a complicated joke that's politically incorrect at so many levels.
many levels, my God.
Simultaneously.
But also, I think that joke, like the jar joke and the one that Patty told, they don't have to be Jewish jokes.
But that's a tough Irishman. That could be a tough
That could be a
Irishman.
tough Irish guy.
Here's one
No.
that has to be Jewish, and
Okay.
I
Patty, go
like
for
it a
it.
lot because it sort of describes.
Hold the microphone a little closer.
No, I can't.
That's a Jewish moderator. Tell your joke, but just hold the microphone.
I'm just
All right.
television professional.
Don't nudge her.
So they're Jewish parents, and they live in a neighborhood where the best school is a Catholic school. So they send their kid to the Catholic school. And the kid comes back one day and he says, "Guess what I learned? I learned that there are three gods, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." And his father is furious, and he says, "Now you listen. There's only one God, and we don't believe in him." There's no way that can be other than a Jewish joke.
That's a contemporary
there-
Jewish joke.
But,
Here's
Now-
a joke that could only be Jewish joke.
okay.
The rabbi is walking on a weekday through the sanctuary, and he looks up and he says, "God, you are all omniscient, you are omnipotent. I am nothing. I am a grain of sand. I am dirt under your feet." And the president of the congregation walks in and he said, "God, I am nothing. I am a piece of dirt. I'm under your feet." And the little shamus, the sexton who takes care of the synagogue, walks in and he said, "God, I am nothing." And the president turns to the rabbi and said, "Look who thinks he's nothing."
one that can't be anything but Jewish? You know about the
Please.
man who's on his deathbed and his daughter is there, and it's clear that he's really near having the curtain come down. And suddenly he says, I smell kugel. He can barely even speak. And the daughter says, yeah, Mom is making a kugel. And he says, to taste your mother's kugel once before I die. He says, of course, Dad. She gets up, she bounds into the kitchen, and she's gone for quite a while, and he's hanging on by gossamer threads. Finally, she comes back, folds her hands, and says nothing. And he can, again, barely speak. He says, where's the kugel? She says, Mom says it's for the shiva. It's for
But you know what? All of these.
No, Adam, please.
I heard
I'm just going to add an analytic note. I'm just trying to think, what do these jokes all actually
Yes,
have in
what
common?
do they have in common?
It's, aside from greed, rudeness, and discourtesy to others, is essentially they're all about taking a realistic attitude at a sentimental moment, right? That's exactly what that joke is about. And that's what your joke is about too, Bud. It's about saying, the guy is saying, we all know that we're faking this business of putting ourselves
right.
down before God. So the nerve of this guy pretending he's as lowly as we are. And it's the same thing. And I think that is the one thread that perhaps runs through jokes that are distinctively Jewish, is that they all involve saying, here's the truth about this situation, even though we know the pious thing we're supposed to say
Well, there's-
about
also,
the situation.
we're going to pretend we're being
Yes.
self-critical,
Exactly.
and we're going to have this pseudo self-abnegation, but we're really the best.
Yes, exactly.
realists.
That's
Right.
Well, see, that's what the joke that I told, which will be my final joke of the evening, about the three guys, that there is this combination of inferiority complex and superiority complex.
Right.
That we are victims of discrimination, but we know better that we're smarter anyway.
Right.
There's a
Well, it's
joke
little
like
bit
that where
like-
the guy,
Oh.
the
Please.
two guys are outside the church, and it says, you get $1,000 if you convert to Christianity. And one of them says, I'm going to go try. So he goes and he comes back, and he says to his friend, I'm a Christian, I converted. And he said, did you get the money? And the first guy said, that's all you people ever talk about.
You know, but you know, we've talked about the other version of that joke. It's the 1930s. It's a depression. There's a sign in the window: "We convert Jews $100 apiece." This man says to his wife, "Look, you know, we need money. It says in the Talmud we have our obligation to ourselves. We have to go in there and get this. We have to put food on the table." So they go through a whole ceremony of baptism. They say their rights to Jesus, and they become children in the Christian faith. Next morning, he gets up. He starts putting on his tefillin. And his wife says, "What are you doing? Don't you remember we went through a conversion?" He says, "Oh, yeah, already. I got a goyish cup." You know,
Oh, there's a joke like that where the priest says, Mr. Goldberg, who runs the hardware store near here, has been taking catechism lessons, and he's converted. And he has a few words to say to the congregation. And Goldberg gets up, he said, fellow Goyim.
Patty, you were about to say.
Yeah, but I decided not to. But I'm going to tell a joke that I think could only be Jewish joke, because that's sort of the theme, right?
Right.
it's become so.
Yeah. There are four rabbis, and they're constantly having Talmudic arguments. And it always boils down to 3 against 1. So this odd man out says, God, I know I'm right. Just give me a sign to show these guys that I'm right. So it's a beautiful day, and there's a storm cloud. And the guy says, see, I'm right. And the other 3 rabbis say, that's nothing. It's a natural phenomenon. So the odd man out says, God, I need something a little more. You know, give me a big sign. So it rains, it pours. And again, the rabbis say, that's nothing. So finally, the guy says, God, just, you know, go all out. I really need to show these guys that I'm right. You know I'm right. I know I'm right. So in a booming voice, they hear, he's right. And the odd man out looks, see, I'm right. And one of the rabbis says, so what? It's 3-2 now.
You know, I was about to say that. Whoops. Oh, nice baptism.
Nice act.
Sorry, yeah, for my next act. Like my wife would say, you can't take him anywhere. There's a joke that I always heard as a Jewish joke. It's about a guy who opens a barber shop. A priest goes in, gets a haircut, and the barber won't take money. He says, you're a man of God, you're a clergyman, I don't take money from you. Next day, the barber goes out to get the newspaper, and there's a beautiful crucifix in gratitude from the priest. Minister goes in, same thing happens. He says, I don't take money from a man of God, and he goes out to get the newspaper, and there's a Bible inscribed. Rabbi comes in and gives him a haircut, and he says, no, you're a clergyman, I don't take money. Goes out the next morning, there are 12 rabbis there. Now, that's a joke that could create some discomfort. However, a reason I told it was this. The only reason I told it was this. Name drop alert. My wife and I are over at the house of Amy Tan and her husband in Sausalito, which is where we live.
She doesn't look Jewish.
She doesn't look Jewish.
No.
Yeah. But she says, I got a joke to tell you. It was the same joke, but it was about a Frenchman, a German, and Chinese. So, however, when you use Yiddish, it always, it's like the Japanese woman who is supposedly having an affair with a Jewish man, and her husband is told that she's having a secret affair, and he goes up and confronts her, and she says, who told you this, Mishigas? And when you tell that kind of a joke, it has, the Yiddish in it, and suddenly it becomes distinctive in its own way, right? It's sui generis.
I was going to say, I hesitate to bandy Jewish jokes with joke tellers of this quality. But I will tell you, I know only one French Jewish joke. Would you like to hear the one French Jewish joke?
Could you do it in English?
As long as it's in English,
Sure,
yes,
I'll do it
right,
in
yeah.
English. But this is from my French Jewish family. I thought, and it's appropriately saucy. A woman goes to a psychiatrist and says, my husband, Jewish woman, is totally fixated on his mother. He's a Jewish man. He's totally fixated on his mother. He thinks about nothing but his mother. All he cares about is mom. What can I do to get him to pay attention to me? And the psychiatrist says, well, you have to sex it up a little bit. He's a French psychiatrist in a French Jewish family. And he says, well, why don't you buy some beautiful black lingerie and wear that around the house and seduce him in that way? So she does. She goes to Christian Dior and she outfits herself in black lingerie, and she goes to the house and she lies down in a seductive pose, and her husband comes in and he sees her and he says, oh, he said, why are you dressed all in black? Did something happen to mother? That's a French Jewish joke.
All right, but let's.
I'm going to say something about Jewish jokes.
All right, go ahead, please. No, go ahead, please.
They get me a little nervous because they go on and on and on, and I always think, am I going to know when the joke's over?
But can I raise another point here? Everybody here is laughing at these. We all love these jokes, right? But it seems to me that there's a certain sense in which the kind of Jewish humor and comedy that you're memorializing here, Michael, is sort of memorial, right? I think about my grandfather. I think it was true about your father, right. But they only spoke in jokes, right? That was the one way that they could communicate emotion, eventfulness, anything, was by telling a joke, by telling a Jewish joke, right?
Well, but I'm sorry.
No,
but I mean,
and I was just to finish, Jeff, and the thought
Yeah.
is, I think in some ways now when we gather together to tell these kinds of jokes in a funny, almost semi-conscious way, we're remembering the earlier generation. That it's it's self-consciously a legacy now.
It's
as
call
much
to
as it
memory.
is a practice.
I had a question similar to Adam's, which is, a lot of these jokes depend on an atmosphere of anti-Semitism, of
Exactly.
being at risk, of being outsiders, and Jews have done really well, especially in the United States. How will our kids appreciate this kind of humor if they have grown up in a world that doesn't really see that kind of friction?
They may not understand it, Jeffrey, and there's a poignancy in that. In fact, I could have written an elegy here, but I wrote a book that I wanted to be hilarious and to be upbeat and also somewhat didactic, admittedly. But let me just give you an example of how this humor has evolved in ways that nobody would have expected. And I'm going to read it from my book because the narrative is important here, so he says. So two Texans are sitting on a plane going to Dallas with an old Jewish man sitting between them. The first Texan says, my name is Roger. I own 250,000 acres. I have 1,000 head of cattle, and they call my place the Jolly Roger. The second Texan says, my name is John. I own 350,000 acres. I have 5,000 head of cattle, and they call my place Big John's. They both look down at the little old Jewish man who says, my name is Lenny Leibowitz, and I own only 300 acres. Roger looks down at him and says, 300 acres? What do you raise? Nothing, says Lenny. Well, then, what do you call it, asks John. Downtown Dallas. All right, so this... At one time, that would have been a verboten joke. You know, you're not supposed to say Jews are that successful, that wealthy. Now, I don't know what's happening with Bannon, but, you know, secularization, acceptance, assimilation, and so forth, has put it on a whole, there's a kind of celebration of success. And some of it is very positive. I loved, when I was on with Scott Simon on Weekend Edition, he asked me to tell this joke because his name is Scott, but the joke goes like this. A guy's in the 21st century, and he sees a man walking with his really good-looking son. He says, boy, your boy's so good-looking. He said, thank you. He said, what a good, handsome boy. He says, what's his name? He says, his name is Shlomo. He says, Shlomo? What kind of name is Shlomo? He said, well, he's named after his dead grandfather whose name was Scott. That's why Scott Simon wanted the joke to be told. But it's a cyclical kind of happy, positive, affirmative joke, really, when you think about it. You know, saying this stuff will go around.
And it goes from jokes about how Jewish we are to jokes about how Jewish we're not, you know.
Yeah.
But you were about to say?
Well, I also think that there is a strong streak of misogyny in Jewish humor. The partner jokes, like the guy comes home early from the office, he finds his partner in bed with his wife, and he says, Harry, I have to, but you?
Well, I wanted to get to that because I think that is, I mean, the misogyny in this book, in this respect, you know, Judaism is basically identical to every other religion and ethnic group in that they discriminate against women and treat women horribly. But there is a particular stereotype, or at least a couple of stereotypes, about Jewish women that are that play out through.
I thought you were about to say, Jeffrey, that are accurate.
Oh, no, here is a more Jewish joke of the partner type than that one. The wife comes home early, finds her husband in bed with a popsy, and she screams and yells, and he says, it's nothing, and this little blonde thing gathers her clothes and runs out and said, it means nothing, it means nothing. Finally gets his wife calmed down, and he said, let's go out to a nice dinner. They go to a nice restaurant, and the guy's partner walks in with a popsy. And the wife turns to the husband and said, ours is nicer.
This is a troubling part of writing this book because
seriously,
I'm a card-carrying
That's
feminist.
a more Jewish joke.
I very openly have said that I'm a feminist and believe in a lot of feminist principles, but the fact of the matter is a lot of the humor is patriarchal and misogynistic and sexist. There's no denying it. And a lot of the jokes are obviously made up by men, although there are some jokes that really push that envelope as well. Richard Lewis once said that he has this difficulty when he's making love to his girlfriend because he pretends that he's another guy, actually. But a lot of particularly
Give us, Michael.
matrimony jokes.
Anyone get that? I don't get that joke. But anyway,
Let me say what I said in defense of some of this. We're not in defense, but to give it a different interpretation, which is very important. You know, like I love the joke that came up during the time of John Paul being the Pope, and the joke was that there were three decorators who were called by the Pope, and they were called in one after the other. First was one of his fellow countrymen, a Polish decorator, takes all the measurements and says, Pope says to him, okay, what do you do the job for? He says, I'll do it for 3,000. Pope says, break it down for me. That's 1,000 for the materials, 1,000 for the labor, and 1,000 for me to do the job. He says, okay, I'm going to get two more estimates. Brings in an Italian decorator, same thing, $6,000. Break that down. He says, well, 2,000 for labor, 2,000 for material, 2,000 for me to do the job. He says, okay, one more estimate. Brings in a Jewish decorator. He says, $9,000. He says, can you break that down? He says, yeah, 3 for you, 3 for me, and 3 for the Polish decorator. Now, it's not... The reason that joke obviously pushes envelopes and so forth, you have to realize, I had a colleague of mine, I happen to be a literature professor, I had a colleague of mine who said, you know, the only honest one is the Pole in that joke. And I started thinking about a lot of these Jewish jokes, especially Jewish American princess jokes, from a different angle. They really celebrate. In many ways, they're misogynistic. They say that all these Jewish young women are princesses and so forth, but there's a pride in that. There's a kind of strange pride. We've made it in America. We've been able to...
Do you think that's true, Patty? It doesn't strike me as there's a lot of pride in that. No, your microphone. The micro. Oh, yeah.
No, I will say, I mean, the only defense I can come up with for the Jewish jokes, not being misogynist, is the guys don't come out that well either, really. But
no one comes out that.
No, but I mean, they're not. The Jewish mother isn't unlike a Thurber woman. I mean, it's not unique to the Jewish woman, but
know.
they don't come out that way.
Well, I mean,
It's either, but I mean, look, the very first one, Eve, wasn't so great. She was a sinner. She was seductive, and then from there,
you say that like it's a bad thing.
yeah.
But I mean, like Bud's joke about with the hat, you know, the Jewish mother is certainly a big figure in all of these. I mean, again, that strikes me as sort of the overbearing, the worried about the success of the kid.
And also the talker.
And the complainer,
And the
you know, that
complainer.
I'm
Yeah,
not
but
gonna
she's
tell
practical. She's practical. It's like, you know,
No.
a husband dies and the wife calls up and says, I want to have an obituary for my husband. They say, well, you have to pay by the word. She says, okay, Mort died, Volvo for sale. I mean, there's a very practical minded
Right, exactly.
But-
Michael, can I ask you a question? What
But you know the famous Elaine May, Mike Nichols mother
of the astronaut?
skit.
Tell
Yeah, reenacted. Well, it's about a mother calling her son and guilt tripping her son, and there's not a person who can't relate to that mother.
Isn't the punchline of that he's an astronaut and she's guilt tripping him about not calling her at all, and he's actually
Right.
been in orbit?
Oh,
The
you
rocket
know,
scientist.
You know that joke where the guy calls his mother and says, "Mom, it's Joe. We're going to be up there this weekend. I'm bringing Sarah and the family and the kids." And she says, "Don't bother to call. Don't worry. I didn't die while you didn't call me. I was okay." And puts on this thing. He says, "I know, Mom. We've been really busy, but we're going to come up this weekend." And she and I'm going to bring my wife Sarah. And she says, "Sarah? Who's Sarah?" Said, "Isn't this 914-658-2135?" She said, "No, 2136." He said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, madam." He said, "You mean you're not coming?"
I want to ask a question of Bud and Michael, and that is who, and I wonder if you've looked into this, Michael, who makes up jokes? Now, we all know comedy writers.
Commodity traders.
Right, who make up comedy, who make up one-liners, write things. But jokes, like the ones we've been telling tonight, are very intricately wrought things, right? And somebody, they can't just appear, right? Somebody has to make up all of the jokes we know.
Guys in
And-
prison used to be the apocryphal
But
story. Who knows?
This is pre-internet.
jokes.
These
Yes.
jokes that
Well,
we're telling.
actually, I mean, I don't think this is just me, but I don't hear jokes very
Anymore,
often
right.
anymore. And you know, humor. There's lots of humor, but you know,
Well, certainly you do. I mean, on every late night program.
But they're not. They don't have the same setup kind of. You know.
well, the jokes are different, but that's exactly what monologues and on
I
these
guess.
shows are.
Jeffrey's hit an
I mean,
important
I
point,
don't
I
you
think.
think?
The
I mean,
jokes are
like for
becoming
example, I remember when I
somewhat-
first got out of college and you know started having a job in New York, you would hear that the Wall Street trading floors was where the jokes, especially like the bad bad taste jokes,
Sick jokes.
The
Sick
space
Yeah, like
what
sick
was Krista McAuliffe's last words, what does this button do, like really bad taste about people who died and things like that. Does that exist anymore?
Well, there's I mean, when you consider Trump and how few
See,
Trump
we've
jokes
gotten
there
so
are,
far into
Without
the
missing-
evening without making.
I know, but I had to do
But
But
what
there
about
aren't that many jokes considering what a subject he is.
I don't think we know the genesis of a lot of jokes. I think it's pure speculation, maybe a metaphysical question, a profound one. But I can tell you this, that I just interviewed John Cleese from Monty Python on my radio program, and he was saying, I can't do college campuses anymore. They're too politically correct. And Jerry Seinfeld has said the same thing, and Chris Rock has said the same thing. What they're doing are monologues for the most part. They're not necessarily the old traditional. We were talking about Buddy Hackett before. He was a joke teller.
Yeah,
They
but
don't
there
tell
were very
jokes like
few
that.
of those. Myron Cohen, people like that.
Yeah,
Those
Myron
were
Cohen.
sort of
Okay,
all-
guy falls down on Miami Beach. They get in a stretcher. They put him in an ambulance. The doctor puts a blanket. He says, "Are you comfortable?" He says, "Oh, I make a living." These kind of things. This is a classic joke.
And Henny Youngman used to tell rapid fire jokes. I mean, I do think this style of stand up now is more discouraging. I mean, Louis C.K. It's more in terms of storytelling.
Narratives.
Narratives.
Narratives, right.
Is that
That Miami joke reminded me of that joke where those two guys were in the urinal together, and one of them turned to the guy next to him and he said, "Are you from Cleveland?" And the guy says, Yeah, I was born there, but I left when I was 6 months old. Did you go to Beth Shalom Synagogue? He said, yeah, but how would you know that? And he said, were you circumcised by Reb Goldberg? He said, yeah, but how do you know that? He said, he cuts to the side and you're pissing on my shoe.
That is a Jewish joke.
That is, definitively.
That is definitely a Jewish joke.
So, yeah, I think that qualifies as a Jewish
I
joke.
think that's the first one I ever heard.
A lot of these
That's an
have,
old joke.
a lot of these have a certain rhythm to it, a certain kind of cadence to them that goes back to the shtetl. I saw the trajectory when I realized I was on the stage with Isaac Bashevis Singer doing an interview. Very solemnly said to him, Mr. Singer, Yiddish Nobel Prize-winning writer. I said, do you believe in free will? And he said, I have no choice. You know, it's just like that kind of Henny Youngman sort of thing. And there's a lot of intellectual profundity that's buried in there. So I started thinking about a lot of these jokes and how they cover that ground. You know, Henny Youngman. You know, you mentioned Henny Youngman. I went to the doctor. The doctor said, you're sick. I said, I'm going to get another opinion. He says, okay, you're ugly too. You know, and so, even up to and including Rodney Dangerfield, you know, who would say things like, I met this woman, she said, come to my house tonight, nobody will be there. I went, nobody was there, you know. It goes into America from the shtetl, really.
But that, I mean, again, you know, nobody was there. I mean, that strikes me as, so, yet it's kind of a Jewish joke, even though it has nothing to do with Judaism. It has to do with the persona of the person telling it as this sort of I mean,
Shlemiel.
the Shlemiel. Now, you have a whole chapter in your book on Shlemiels.
Shlemiels and schmucks.
Shlemiels and schmucks. Like, why a whole chapter on Shlemiels and schmucks?
With this administration, you have to ask.
Well, but the famous difference between a Shlemiel and a Shlemazel.
Well, Sandy Koufax said it brilliantly when, you know, he wouldn't pitch on what we used to call, in Cleveland, it was like a fish holiday. We said Yom Kippur rather than Yom Kippur. Yeah. And Joe Garagiola, who was a catcher and then became a sports announcer, said to him, why aren't you pitching? And he said, I guess you could say I'm a Shlemiel, Joe. And what is a Shlemiel? Gave the most cogent definition between a Shlemiel and a Shlemazel. The Shlemiel is the one who knocks over the soup, and the Shlemazel, meaning bad luck, is the one it spills on. Right. But schmuck used to be a word that had a great deal of almost vilification to it. You know, a person who was greedy, who was a villain, and so forth was a schmuck. And then the word evolved and it became almost synonymous with Shlemiel, which strangely enough, it's like the word shiksa at one time. It was a very vilifying and pejorative word. Now, with the help of Sex and the City and a lot of popular culture, shiksa appeal on Seinfeld, it's become a much more accepted word. I have to tell you, just in terms of what you're asking about Shlemiels and schmucks, this book went to press, and I thought I'd covered most of the joke terrain that was out there, but suddenly somebody says to me, hey, I got a joke you might not have heard. And guess what? I hadn't heard it. So this is a joke about a guy who dies, and he was a real schmuck. In the old meaning of the word, you know, he was not a nice man. He was ruthless. He was even unkind to his neighbors and his friends. And his brother goes to the rabbi, and his brother says to the rabbi, look, I know you have a capital campaign. You're trying to raise $1 million. I will give you $1 million if you just say at my brother's funeral tomorrow that he was a mensch. That's all you have to do is say that he was a mensch. And the rabbi, who's a good guy, is agonizing over this. He goes home, he says to his wife, how can I say he was a mensch? He was a terrible man. Wife says, you're going to have to make up your mind on this. I don't know what to tell you. Next morning, he gets up. There's a big crowd of people, like there often are for schmuck funerals. And the rabbi looks out, and he says, I have to be honest with you. I'm your spiritual leader. This man was not a nice man. He was ruthless. He was actually unscrupulous. But compared to his brother, he was a mensch.
Well, I mean, the funeral. I mean, there's a Hollywood joke that I heard in that is that, you know, one of the old, you know, studio heads, just a horrible guy. Everyone hated him, and he dies, and there's a huge funeral and this packed. And one guy says to another, he says, like, God, he was such a terrible guy. Like, why was there such a big crowd? And the guy says, well, you give the people what they want. And
Harry Cohn was the...
Harry the Rat.
Cohn, yeah.
Harry the Rat Cohn.
But I mean, isn't that? I mean, the Shlemiel. I mean, will people in 50 years know what a Shlemiel is?
Oh, yeah.
Read the tea leaves.
I think as Yiddish dies, the use of Yiddish words in the English language grows. So you hear people you hear Gentiles using words. Sometimes they don't know how to pronounce. And in fact, there was a piece in the Wall Street Journal about somebody in the Georgia legislature who was angered at another member, stood up and called him a dumb smook. So as fewer and fewer people actually speak Yiddish conversationally, I think the words are more. All these words are in the dictionary now.
They've all become part of the popular lexicon.
Right.
Most of them have. You know, about the Yiddish, the Esperanto convention, they spoke one language, but it was Yiddish.
Right, in that. Well, I think this is true. I once wrote a piece about being asked to do the Purim spiel at the Jewish Museum here, and having to kind of get myself up to speed on.
Yeah, I did the Purim.
Right.
I did the
We
Purim
all did.
spiel.
We all have done.
We've all been this.
We all been there.
You
We
didn't
all,
do
we-
the Purim spiel?
No, I did not do this.
What kind of
spiel.
schlemazel are you?
But one of the things I was writing about is the way, but it's saying that though it's true that sort of classic Yiddishkeit manners have evaporated and has aged and so on, that at the same time there's a kind of much more dispersed pantomime of Jewish manners that's spread around. One of my favorite places to go to be treated in a traditionally Jewish way is Sable's, the smoked fish emporium on 77th and 2nd, which is staffed exclusively by Asians who have emigrated from Zabar's across the park over 40 years. And when you go in there to buy fish, they criticize it. It's what my grandfather would have done. They said, I'd be embarrassed to put this on the table if you don't buy enough. I'd just be embarrassed for you to have it, and you buy more. And they say, now I'm not embarrassed for you. And it occurred to me at that moment that it's exactly that kind of dissemination. So you have the combination of an Asian sense of face and a Jewish sense of guilt. It's the most powerful merchandising formula in the history of capitalism.
But don't you think that sort of the New York, I mean, that I've often
The Carnegie Deli is closed.
I've often thought that a lot of sort of New Yorkers of all ethnicities, that the Jewish way of expressing themselves, Puerto Ricans, Italians, I mean, that it is kind of the common language.
It's the common language of contention too. I once suggested that they have an English Yiddish phrase book for visitors, except instead of saying, "Where's the nearest post office?" it would say, "May streetcars grow on the back of your throat." And curses. My father used to collect curses.
To collect cursive?
Yeah, he liked Irish curses, but he loved Yiddish curses. The best one he heard was from a woman who was arguing with a butcher in Miami Beach. And she said, "May you have an injury that is not covered by workman's compensation."
It does. Getting to
Please.
your point about New Yorkers all seem like Jews. Joy Behar has a joke where she said, "Last year I got a call, Happy Hanukkah," the person said, and I said, "Ma, you know I'm not Jewish."
Well, Lenny Bruce said if you're from New York, you're Jewish. You know, you can worship at a cathedral, you can say you're Catholic and everything, but if you live in New York because of the way the English language is spoken there, because of the idioms and so forth. On the other hand, Bruce used to say, if you live in Montana, forget it, or Wyoming. You can be in a synagogue and you can celebrate Hanukkah and all the rest of the holidays, but you can't really be Jewish.
Right.
So,
Yeah, he had that brilliant bit of Jewish.
Adam, I mean, you're from Montreal.
From Canada, yes.
And
Bagels there.
now
Much better bagels.
Was
smoked beef.
I mean, there's obviously a serious Jewish community there, but was Jewish humor different in Canada?
I think Jewish culture is different in Canada than it is here, in part because Canadians are such a non-contentious people, as a rule. My favorite Canadian joke, it's when you say, "How do you get 25 Canadians out of a pool?" You say, "Please get out of the pool." But within that much less contentious world, Jewish humor, I think the greatest Jewish comic novelist, putting Roth as Philip Roth and Saul Bellow as literary novelists in the first instance, was Mordecai Richler, who was as purely Montreal as anyone could be. And he was interesting, in fact, because he had taken on a lot of Canadian manners as well. Hard drinking guy, which isn't as common. But I think that if you read his books, the single funniest Jewish novel I would submit that is Jewish is his book Solomon Gursky Was Here, which is a kind of Romana Clay about, you've read it, but
Yeah.
Well, and
about the-
he
I
wrote
wouldn't
What
say
Makes Sammy
Stern.
Run. No, who
No,
wrote
no.
once? That's
Duddy Kravitz, which is a
what
similar,
makes-
similar kind of book. But the point is that his comedy came much less out of the collision of different kinds, which is the source of so much Jewish comedy with Roth and Brewster
Right.
Friedman, so on. It came out of a very self-enclosed community, and the manners was more like Trollope in a certain way. It was all about a little universe within the larger universe.
But what about Kansas City? I mean, also not a
Similar.
not a hotbed. I mean, not a huge Jewish community. I mean, but was all this humor
Well,
the same there?
It's a little different. I've said on this stage before, Calvin Trillin, for instance, is a very common Jewish name in Kansas City. My full name is Calvin Marshall Trillin. The Marshall is an old family name, not our family, but an old family name. Well, we had basically a Reform synagogue, a Reform temple and a conservative synagogue and a Orthodox synagogue. And it's a little midway. It doesn't necessarily, for instance, the talkative wife and the laconic husband is a Jewish joke thing, but it's also a Midwestern joke thing. My uncle Jerry he said the joke that always reminded him of my parents was the actor is struggling to get a part, and he finally gets a role in a Broadway play, and he comes back to his parents and he said, I've got a role, I've made it. He said, what are you playing? He said, I'm playing the father. And the mother said, that's great. And his own father looks a little disappointed and said, well, we're proud of you, son, but we were hoping you'd get a speaking part.
Jeffrey, let me say one thing about Montreal, because it's a wonderful joke. It's in my book. There's Adam was talking about Mordecai Richler, who I've always thought very. In fact, Bud Trillin and I did an event in San Francisco, and we were asked by the audience, "Who's the funniest Jewish novelist?" And Bud said Max Schulman. I said Philip Roth early on, but also
I would say
Richler. There's a
Mordecai
story in
Richler.
Richler, a book of Richler's called The Street. You must know it, Adam. There's a story in there where there's a big sign on the Montreal beach and it says "No Jews Allowed," and they struggle with this and they feel very upset about it. So they steal the sign in the middle of the night. These paskunyaks, those of you who know your Yiddish, they steal the sign, but they bring it back the next morning and they put it there, and Jews is crossed out and Litvaks is written instead of Jews.
Now that's an esoteric joke, I gotta say. That's
Well, my father thought Litvaks were vaguely risible. Everything.
Just the word Litvak
Just the
wasn't
word Litvak he thought was funny. He always smiled.
It's Lithuanian Jews, pretty much.
I know, but no, I think Richler, that book, that's not, I love that book, but it's not my favorite one. My favorite one is St. Urban's Horseman.
Right.
But there's a wonderful Richler passage there where the daughter of this family, which is a thinly disguised novel about the Bronfman family, the Seagram's people, the daughter
Does Anne Frank?
does a production of Anne Frank starring herself in London, and the Mordecai character, the sort of nasty drunk guy, and she's much too old for the role. It's just terrible. And she's sitting there, and the scene comes where policemen knock on the door. They're trying each door on the block and the Mordecai character stands up and saying, "They're in the attic. They're in the attic." One of his great nasty things was and I guess it was Duddy Kravitz. There was some kind of charity event where they showed the movie, and he was in the reception line, and Mrs. Bronfman came through. I think this was before Solomon Gursky, and she said, "You've come a long way for a boy from St. Urban Street." And Mordecai said, "You've come a long way for the wife of a bootlegger." I mean, yeah, he had a real mean tongue. But funny.
We'll get some questions here. Are there any subjects that are just off limits?
There were for me in writing this book. It's funny, I talk about some of the interviews I did, and one of them was with Joan Rivers, and I said, and she became more blue and more, shall we say, outrageous in many ways. She always wanted to be Lenny Bruce, and toward the end, I think she became more inclined toward telling off-color jokes and what you would call blue humor, doing blue humor. a very aggressive kind of, I mean, she started out, talking about herself mainly, self-lacerating, wearing open-toed shoes to show off her breasts, those kind of lines, But then it became a lot more directed toward celebrities and the like. Anyway, I asked her, is there anything that it's off? And she admitted that there was one thing that she had in her quiver of jokes. It was a joke about Michelle Obama, and it was a racial joke, and she just couldn't do it. She couldn't bring herself to do it. I found myself pretty much recoiling against some of the racial humor that, there's an old Jewish joke, it's a classic Jewish joke, about a girl who goes off and works in the Peace Corps. She goes to Africa and she comes back with a husband who is like 6'8", and he's a Watusi and he's got a bone in his nose. And the mother comes out and says, "I said rich doctor." All right, so but to be perfectly honest with you, I'm a public figure. I have to be concerned about jokes being, Black Lives Matter are going to be throwing this stuff up at me. So a lot of the racial stuff I stayed away from just out of necessity, though there are a few in there that I think are innocuous. But the most verboten jokes are the most fascinating jokes. There's a joke I won't tell, but it's a joke about Palestinian and Israeli mothers. Some of you may know it. And it's a joke that obviously was too radioactive to put in the book, and yet it's fascinating to deconstruct it and to realize what's behind the joke.
But do you remember that when David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker, was doing an evening with Larry David a while ago, and the single funniest thing, Richler-worthy, that I've seen in years is the episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry gets infatuated with a Palestinian woman who works at this Palestinian chicken. No, she works at the Palestinian chicken restaurant, and it all builds around like she's violently anti-Semitic, but he still wants to sleep with her. And David said to him, "Why did you do it?" He said, "Because I'd done a whole season that was premised on the idea that my character wouldn't sleep with a woman who voted for George W. Bush." And he said, "I realized that was a complete lie. I would sleep with anyone who wanted to sleep with me, so I invented an anti-Semite who I would still be ready to sleep with." And I thought that note of realism to a painful degree was authentic.
One question that just came from the audience, which I think is interesting. What about humor in Israel? I don't know, but do any of you know, is it the same?
An Israeli Jewish joke.
Yeah.
A lot of them have to do with Israeli rudeness. I mean, I write about Ephraim Kishon in here, who's sort of the Art Buchwald of Israel and all, and who's actually very clever. But, there's the old joke about a guy, he's obviously taking a survey of some sort. He goes up to an Israeli, an American, a Russian, and a Pole, and he says, "I'm taking a survey, gentlemen, excuse me, but I have to ask your opinion of the meat shortage." And the Polish guy says, "What's meat?" And the Russian says, "What's an opinion?" And the American says, "What's a shortage?" And the Israeli says, "What's excuse me?" So, it's that. And a lot of that's self-reflexive about,
That's a very good joke.
It is a good joke.
That's
Flight
a very good
attendant
joke.
says on El Al Airlines, "Do you want dinner?" She says, "What are my choices?" "Yes or no?" And she's really
Now, one subject that has not come up a little, it come up a little here, is food, which is often a subject of great interest to Jews. And the intersection of food and humor, is that something that, where does that?
You got to ask Bud. That's his bailiwick.
I don't know any Jewish jokes that have to do with food, I don't think.
That
You
sounds
have the
like a
recipe
setup
for-
line.
You have the recipe for chopped liver
I have the recipe for chopped liver.
with Miracle Whip, which is actually a recipe.
Oh, well, that's true. I was asked once to speak at a Jewish center in Chicago, and I said, I knew from childhood, a rabbi asked me, Rabbi Pupko was his name, and knowing that rabbis got special discounts, I was trying to get out of it. And he taught me, he said there was a series on Gentile American writers viewing the Jewish American experience or something, or basically what the Goyim think. And I said, well, Rabbi, I don't qualify as a Gentile American writer. And anyway, he finally said, he talked me into it, and he said, we need a title. And I like long titles with colons in the middle. And I said, well, a title I've never actually given the speech on, but I've talked about is Farm Price Supports, a 30-year overview, concentrating on but not exclusive to soybean pricing structures. And the rabbi said, perfect. And about an hour later, he called up and he said, the nice lady who types up the bulletin said, what's the Jewish content in that? I said, do you have another title? And I said, yeah, well, I had thought of one in this last hour. He said, does it have a colon? I said, yeah. And I said, it's Midwestern Jews, making chopped liver with Miracle Whip. And after the speech, a woman came up to me and said, that was a very interesting metaphor. I said, alas, madam, that was no metaphor. That was my mother's recipe.
But surely you know the one about the snobby delicatessen where the guy goes in, old woman goes in, and the guy behind the counter and says, she says, I'd like a half a pound of chopped liver. He says, no. He said, ma'am, we call it pate. He said, okay, I'd like a half a pound of pate. He said, I'd like a half a pound of lox. He said, no, we call it Nova Scotia. Okay, half a pound of Nova Scotia. She says, and I want some blintzes. No, we don't call them blintzes, we call them crepes. And she says, okay, and I want them crepes too, but I want it all delivered tomorrow on Saturday. She says, we never schlep on Shabbos.
Is this, where is, I know what I want to ask. Can non-Jews tell these jokes?
That's a touchy area. You know, I go into that in some degree in the book. Sometimes these jokes are sort of verboten for non-Jews to tell, but they tell them, and a lot of times they tell them with goodwill and with grace and with certainly good intentions. It's a funny area, though, because sometimes, you know, a lot of Jews are sensitive and they take umbrage when they hear certain jokes, especially if they think they border on anti-Semitism. And I think it's almost case by case. It's a difficult thing
Patty,
to say.
you've written for others. You've written humor.
Others? You
Well,
mean not for myself?
Well, like you've written for.
I've written pieces and been paid for them. Is that what you're
No,
saying?
no. That's the only legitimate reason to write. But haven't you written for other?
For Gentiles?
No, I mean like
What do you get?
comedy.
What do you
I
get?
mean like
sketches.
for
Oh, I've
like
written- yes.
Saturday Night Live and
David Brenner.
Right. Did you feel like you had to know whether the person was Jewish to tell certain jokes?
No, there were so many other reasons I couldn't do the job. No, the hardest person I wrote for in a way was David Brenner, who he's Jewish, right? Yeah, he's
And Philadelphia.
and Philadelphian.
Right.
And I was just in a room, and somebody would come in and say, David wants jokes about the 60s, and you'd write jokes about the 60s. And no, he wants jokes about tie-dyed shirts, and it was just impossible. But in general, you should understand kind of how the person speaks and what their character is. But I don't think there was somebody at Saturday Night Live that was hosting the show, and the way it worked was they'd come in Monday and tell us and introduce themselves to us. And this woman, I think it might have been Karen Black, said, I want to do a sketch. I'm very good at impersonating a monkey. I want to do a sketch where I impersonate a monkey. But nobody really rose to that. So Jewish, whether or not they were Jewish was the least of why I was having problems.
Have you ever been just deeply offended by any sort of Jewish humor? Do you
No.
recall ever being?
I think jokes are sort of self-selecting.
Trump children, maybe. I mean, I can't think of.
I think if they're funny, then they're not offensive. I mean, usually when people get offended, it's because the joke falls flat.
Well,
But you have to think of your
But
audience.
that's
You
not
have to think of your
entirely.
audience.
That's not entirely true. But I mean, there is a culture of being offended that is highly refined. In the
Don't
United
you think,
States.
Jeffrey, that the culture of being offended, which everyone talks about, right, and Mike was talking about, has a funny double thing, because if you actually go to a comedy club now or go or watch comedy, it can be far more outrageous, far more explicit, and violate more taboos than even Lenny Bruce ever did. We sort of live in an oddly bifurcated culture in that way.
But only
where
in
we're
certain,
very
only in
Accept
certain areas.
anything if they're on your side.
Right. Yeah, you
I
can say
mean,
anything
if
right.
if it's sort of the oppressed class making fun of I mean, the oppressor making fun of the oppressed, it's not funny. If it's
Right.
the other way around, you can get away with anything.
But there was a long time when the jokes about the Shoah, the Holocaust. You think about Larry David doing a guy from the TV show Survivor meeting a survivor of
Right,
Auschwitz.
actually.
I mean, boy, talk about pushing the envelope. You couldn't do those kind of things with humor. I mean, they were absolutely off limits.
Although you did have Hogan's Heroes in the 60s.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I think Mel Brooks opened it up with the producers and, Springtime for Hitler, and then you had the Soup Nazis and Seinfeld. So you have this trajectory. Now, it's almost as, I mean, people are still offended, especially you talk to survivors sometimes, and they'll say, I don't like that humor. And a lot of Jews are offended.
Well, it has to do with time, too. You can joke about Lincoln going to the theater now.
Finally.
In a way you couldn't in April of 1865. Yeah.
The way you couldn't. in
But
April
I
of
think,
1865.
but you may be dating yourself with that. I think. Yeah,
Actually, I got some kickback when I did those in 1865.
It's too soon, but they were.
I guess it always
They
is
were
too
shouting,
soon.
It's
right?
too soon, right?
did we? Where are the questions? Did I?
I think you had them.
Oh, did I? Oh, is that it? Okay. I thought.
There's a
that was
lady who
supposed
has questions right there.
Or more questions.
to- shout it out. What is your question?
My question is the intonation in your voice what makes the joke the Jewish joke?
Absolutely. There's an old joke that Stalin gets a telegram from Trotsky when Trotsky was in Mexico, and he says to his deputy, "Look, Trotsky is recanted. It says, you were right, I was wrong, I should apologize." And the guy says, no, Trotsky's Jewish. Said, "You were right, I was wrong, I should apologize."
But the Jewish grandfather who's taking his grandson, and he's going for a walk, the Zeta with the grandson. They see a big sign, and it says "No swimming allowed" in huge block letters with exclamation marks, and then even larger "No swimming allowed." And the Zeta says to his grandson, "Come on, we're going to go for a swim." And he says, but Zeta, look, it says "No swimming allowed." It says twice "No swimming allowed" with big exclamation marks. No, it says "No swimming allowed." No swimming allowed.
But again, I hear a joke like that, and will anyone get that joke in 10 years?
I heard the definition of a Jewish joke is something that the Gentiles will never understand, and the Jews have already heard before and have a better version of.
But yeah, I think so. I mean, when we think about it, right? Everybody says humor dates and humor ages, and of course, to some degree, that's true. References date and they grow.
The Lincoln stuff is still
The
good.
Lincoln stuff is still hilarious.
More than ever.
More than ever, Bud's Lincoln material.
Bud's
is
Lincoln
funnier.
jokes kill.
But
Not perishable.
the truth is that comedy that's rooted in human character ages extremely well, right? So that we still laugh at Moliere, though we don't understand all the references. We still laugh at Shakespeare, though we don't drink sack or complain too much about our gouty toes, or most of us don't.
The Jewish jokes are not specific. They're not topical. They're
No.
having to do with characters that.
Right. They have to do with ill fortune and a response to it.
But they are about, I think, fundamentally an oppressed group. And doesn't it require some degree?
Thank God there's always going to be oppression. I mean, it's a little.
Thank God for the humorist.
Yeah, right.
So, but no, I think, Patty, finish what you're saying.
I was finished. No, I was going to say, in a way, the Jewish joke is I can make fun of myself way better than you can, asshole.
Yeah.
And
And
that'll
before you
always
can.
be.
And before you can,
Right.
too. Yeah.
So you'd have to posit a world in which no one was ever being mocked or persecuted by people of power before you can posit an end to Jewish
That's a
humor.
WASP country club.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be hard to, as experience shows, it's hard to posit such a world.
Adam, you were talking before about memorializing jokes. A lot of these jokes are in kind of a time warp. I mean, I love that joke that Leo Roston used to tell about, because some of you know Hyman Kaplan and his learning English as a second language stuff. It's about the guy.
Who was Hyman Kaplan?
Hyman Kaplan was a character that Leo Roston, who wrote The Joys of Speaking Yiddish, created, and he was learning English as a second language, and it came from Roston's experiences teaching English as a second language. So he had these great jokes, like the one about the guy who's learning English.
Those
as a
appeared in
second-
the New Yorker too. A lot of
Yeah.
a lot of them appeared in the New Yorker.
So he asked the guy, can you spell cultivate? And he spells C-U-L-T-I-V-A-T-E. So that's great. He says, now use it in a sentence. And, he says, I was waiting for the bus, but it was too cultivate, so I took the subway. That has a kind of time warp to it, There's no getting around it. But it's still
You could
funny.
substitute any immigrant group and it'd be fine.
Wait, Patty, I don't think people heard you. So.
Oh, I just said you can substitute any immigrant group if you don't want to tell a Jewish
But that's,
joke.
I mean, and again, I confess my ignorance here. I mean, do other immigrant groups tell jokes like the Cultivate joke?
There are jokes in my book that I say cross over to other immigrant groups that come out of the Jewish immigrant experience. There's no question about it. But there are some that are, again, distinctly, their flavor, the cadence, the euphony, all of the kinds of things about the language, especially as it goes from Yiddish to spoken English vernacular, that are distinct. I make the argument at any rate. Adam looks a little skeptical. But that's
No. I was just making my Jewish face. That's all. I was just permanently.
You're punim.
My punim. I think that the truth is that there is something distinct about, not just about Jewish humor, which we've been talking about all night, but about Jewish attitudes towards humor. The idea that you valorize, that you value humor, people who are funny. There's a wonderful thing in Albert Goldman's biography of Lenny Bruce, which has good parts and bad parts. We've got a brilliant part, a chapter called "How Jewish Humor Came Across the River from Brooklyn." Do you remember that chapter? It's a brilliant thing, and it just talks about the cult of funny among young Jewish guys in the 1940s. How the thing you most wanted to be in the world was funny, and if someone said you were funny, it was the greatest thing. And he talks about a guy named Joe Ansis. Remember Joe Ansis, who was, by repute, the funniest Jew in New York, funnier than anybody else. And he never became a comedian, never became a successful comedian. But that cult of funny, the idea that the highest expression of human values was being funny, making people spray their food out as you did it, I don't know if that's uniquely Jewish, but it's certainly distinctly Jewish.
And it probably maybe comes out of a culture that isn't particularly reverential about God or anything else.
The movie Diner is a perfect example.
Movie what?
The
Diner.
movie Diner.
Right.
That those guys just wanted to be funny.
Yep.
But you get back to what Jeff was saying, I started saying initially, a lot of this does come out of oppression. We've been around as a people and a tribe longer than any, perhaps, arguably, and the reality is there have been pogroms, there's been genocide, there have been things that have to be faced in the way of adversity. Sal Bellow once said, he was asked, what's the difference between Irish and Jewish humor? He said, they're both from oppressive experiences. They're both from an oppressive history. And there is that link, I think. And yet, I love what Adam's saying, because so much of Jewish values are embodied in Jewish humor, what we call Jewish humor. And those, I hope, will endure, and those will go on.
And on that positive note, please join me in thanking our fabulous panelists.